Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you for reminding me to record. Hare Krishna devotees. It's good to be back always. Let's commence. Today is Karma Yoga, action in Krishna consciousness. Chapter 3 we had um, was on karma yoga, and this chapter is also on karma yoga. But chapter 3 is more of theory, and chapter 5 is it pertains more towards applying that theory in our day-to-day life. Just a note, as mentioned yesterday, we would know more today about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in today's class after the bhajan is completed. So devotees, I request you to kindly give me extra 10 minutes of your time today. I assure you it will be truly worth it. Let's pay our obeisances to our temple deities, Sri Radha Govinda, ISKCON Mangaluru, and pay our respects to our Guru, Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadi Sutarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just give me one moment, please. All clear, Mataji? Am I visible? Just to confirm.
Yes, Guruji.
Right.
Yeah.
And, we can commence today's session. Today, as I mentioned, is Karma Yoga, action and Krishna consciousness. But before that, let us just have a quick look at what we did yesterday. Yesterday was chapter 4, and it was about transcendental knowledge about Krishna. We saw how Krishna gave the message of Bhagavad Gita to Vivaswan, sun god, and from Vivaswan how it went to Manu, and from Manu to Ishvaku, and the parampara, and the importance of parampara, evam parampara praptam. That's from verses 4.1 to 4.10. Then we saw that Krishna was the goal of all paths and is also the creator of Varnashrama system. We also saw why he created Varnashrama system and the present position of the Varnashrama system. And then we dealt with karma, vikarma, and akarma. This was between chapters 4.16 to verse 24. And then we saw that all sacrifices lead to transcendental knowledge. And then we concluded with the summary of transcendental knowledge. This is what we did yesterday. Now, today, before we go into the session, before we commence the session, this is the overview, contents page, as it were. We will today see Arjuna's further question. Like in chapter 3, he starts this chapter also with a question. Sannyasa or Karma Yoga, which is better, is his first question. And then we see Krishna's reply that Karma Yoga is better than Sannyasa Yoga. And then we deal today in a little more detail about Nishkama Karma Yoga, which frees one from bondage. And then we see about liberation by focusing on the Supreme. This is the first sloka of today's chapter, chapter 5, verse 1. Arjuna said, "O Krishna, first of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?" Nishchitam. Nishchitam is benefit. Su Nishchitam is most beneficial. So, as I mentioned in a couple of classes ago, whenever you add su to the Sanskrit word in front of it, it becomes very. It's like English very. It enhances the meaning of the this suffix. Right. The question that Arjuna is asking now to Krishna is, you first asked me to renounce work. and then you are now telling me again to work with devotion. Now, if you see chapter 3, Arjuna starts off with the question of intelligence. So what he is doing is he is having intelligence and renunciation on one side and work on the other side. So he is asking, you tell me to apply my intelligence and to renounce. But then you are also asking me to work. So which one should I do? You remember he used the word ekam vada, tad ekam vada, right? So that is the same question that he is asking again. He wants a clear answer from Krishna as to which of the three, renunciation, intelligence, or working with devotion is better. So as I was saying, this was the question that Arjuna had in the 3rd chapter also. Now, what has caused rise to this chapter, this kind of a question? Let's just quickly rehash from chapter 1 what has happened so far in order for Arjuna to ask this question. In chapter 1, we saw Arjuna cannot fight, said that he cannot fight because he was compassionate. One of the reasons that he gave was that he is compassionate and therefore he is not able to wage the war. For which Krishna in chapter 2 gives the answer of that body is better. You're not the body, you're the soul, which is based on Jnana Yoga, right? So he gives Arjuna the knowledge of the soul, that we are different from the body. Now, Arjuna at that stage is thinking that knowledge of the soul is inertia. That means no activity. That is, you don't have to do activity because Krishna is asking you to renounce. So in chapter 2, Arjuna's focus is on renounce. Now in chapter 3, Krishna slightly shifts the emphasis. Now in chapter 3, Krishna talks about a self-realized person, if you recall, right? Sthitadir Muni, right? Yeah, that was in chapter 3. Now, while dealing with that in in verse 17 and 18 of chapter 3, Krishna says that a self-realized person has no duty, no purpose to fulfill, but what he would do is he will fulfill his duty for duty's sake. That is, he has no reason not to fulfill his duty, and he does not depend on any other living being to fulfill his duty. So now Arjuna has already a problem. Now in the initial reply, Krishna said renounce, and then in chapter 3 for Sthitadir Muni, Krishna says that you have to do your duty for duty's sake. See, then as far as we are concerned now, if you apply chapter 2 and chapter 3 in our regular lives, you would see that it's slightly different. We work because we have a purpose. We have to earn money, we have to get food, we have to satisfy our wants and needs. But once a person is self-realized, he works for duty's sake. The discharge of duty to the satisfaction of Krishna becomes the only purpose and no other reason to work. Now, after chapter 3 comes chapter 4, in which verse 33, Krishna says about the sacrifices to be performed in knowledge is better than sacrifice of material possessions. So now Krishna has brought in knowledge also. So now Arjuna is trying to deal with three aspects. One is knowledge, renunciation, and doing work with devotion, right? So now he's trying to process all this information that Krishna has given him. And while processing that, Arjuna comes to the conclusion that what Krishna is actually recommending is no activity. But then in the last verse, you remember where I closed yesterday's session with this sloka 4.42, where Krishna gives out a call for action. He says, stand up and fight, correct? He directs Arjuna to stand up and fight. So that is what brings Arjuna to ask this question, because now he is trying to juggle between knowledge and renunciation on one hand and activity with devotion on the other hand. And that is what has led to Arjuna asking this question again from Krishna as to enlighten him as to which is the best way to adopt. Now, in the purport of this verse, Srila Prabhupada says Arjuna is not actually confused. He is a great personality. You remember his focus, right? when he was a student of Dronacharya, the story of his focus where he could see only the eye of the bird. So Srila Prabhupada says that these sort of questions where Arjuna asks for clarifications and then again asks for clarification for the clarifications, these are to ensure that the person who is at a much later point of time, like us, who are reading the Bhagavad Gita, who are trying to understand the message of Bhagavad Gita, they should not misunderstand the message that Bhagavad Gita is offering. And therefore, it is that Arjuna is asking again and again as to what is that Krishna recommending. What is Krishna recommending? Is he recommending renunciation? Is he recommending action and knowledge? Or is he recommending action with devotion? Now, these are the three options. Now, I'll just show you a slide where what I mentioned just came up, right? So this is Arjuna's misunderstanding. He starts off with devotional service better than dry mental speculation, right? So in the second chapter, text 11 to 30, Krishna gave the knowledge of soul. Then in text 31 to 37, prescribed duty is explained. Text 40 to 45, entanglement of soul due to fruitive activities. And then towards the end of the chapters, Krishna deals with entanglement by devotional service and no duty for a person in knowledge. Now, in chapter 4, text 33, Krishna explained that all kinds of sacrificial work culminates in knowledge. And the last verse of chapter 4 was to get up and fight, where Krishna asks Arjuna to get up and fight. Now, that is why this question, right? I hope I've made myself clear. Arjuna is asking, of the three things that you have told me, which is better? And let's now see Krishna's reply. Text number 2. This is 5.2. Okay. The personality of Godhead replied, the renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation, but of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work. Sannyasa karma. Sannyasa karma it means taking sannyas from work. This blue man, right? Sannyasa karma is means, and in this sequence it means taking sannyas from work, that is refraining from work or renunciating work. And the next key word is karma yoga. Karma yoga is devotional service. Vishishyate is Krishna is saying it is better. Vishishyate means better, right? So Krishna says that both are good, both will take you to the same goal, but then devotional service is better than renunciation of work. So that is Krishna's decision. Krishna says it is always better that you act in devotion than to renounce all work. Okay, this is a very nice story in Srimad Bhagavatam. Niga is a king. This is Niga's fall down due to fruitive activities. The story is given as an example of the dangers of doing even good deeds without dedicating it to the Lord. So King Niga was fond of doing karma kanda activities. I was mentioning yesterday about karma kanda also, where you do good deeds, but then you don't dedicate it to Lord Krishna. This story, by the way, appears in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's also mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the Krishna book, right? So if you get a chance and if you want to explore more about this, apart from joining the advanced course, you should also get the Krishna book. The Krishna book is a much more simplified version of all the concepts that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's how can I put it? It is a distilled version of Srimad Bhagavatam also. So if you feel you are not able to go through the elaborate 20,000 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, and if you want to understand Gita better, this Krishna book is a very nice book. Please, and I think it is also available on the website. You will get it for free if you order the Bhagavad Gita book. That scheme is still there in the in ISKCON Mangaluru. I'm not sure if it's Krishna book or the book of the Science of Self-Realization, but it is available on ISKCON Mangaluru website itself. Please do try and make time to read the book. Now coming back to Niga, King Niga. Right, as I was mentioning, King Niga was fond of doing karma kanda activities as per the Vedas. Right? Now, karma kanda is performing of sacrifices, and I was saying it performing of sacrifices, but not dedicating it to Krishna. Right? It is to satisfy one's own material need. For example, if one is not keeping good health, Then a Panditji would say, you do this yoga, this yajna, and you do this homa, and then you dedicate it to so and so, a demigod, who will then give you good health. Now, this sort of an activity is a karma kand activity. And then the Panditji says, all this, if you dedicate it to a particular demigod, whoever it is, he will take care of your needs, and you don't have to undergo any suffering. Now, in such an activity, one day King Nriga was giving away a lot of cows to Brahmanas. Okay, because Godana, ko means cow. Okay, and dana means, it's giving up of cows to others. It's sacrifice, in the sense he's transferring ownership of cows to Brahmanas, right? By oversight, somehow, when he was giving so many cows to these Brahmanas, somehow, calculation mistake, the cow which was gifted to one Brahmana was also gifted to another Brahmana. There arose the problem, because then when the Brahmana was trying to take the cow home, the other Brahmana, to whom also it was assigned, said, you can't take my cow. But then the Brahmana replies, but then the king had given this cow to me. So this dispute between the Brahmanas was brought to the king's notice. Now, the moment it was brought to the king's notice, the king understood what happened, and the guy was really confounded. He couldn't explain this blunder that had happened. Right? If it was today, the answer would be simple. You just apply the law. It says once a gift is given to the donor and accepted by the donee, the matter ends, because there's a transfer of ownership, and the donor cannot give that same thing to someone else, because he can't give what he does not have. But then those were the days which were governed by dharma, and not just by laws, right? So it is that the king did not immediately come to a conclusion as to what could be done. Now, I said that those days were governed by dharma, right? So what is dharma? Now, dharma is, the Srimad Bhagavatam says, dharma tu shakshat bhagavat praniti. Dharma tu shakshat bhagavat praniti. That is, dharma is what God says. And where does he say this? He says it in all the scriptures. So why is this verse very important? Is because dharma shouldn't be subjective. What seems to be, or what appears to be dharma to me, may not appear to be dharma to to the person next to me. So in order to remove that subjectiveness, because one man's food is after all another man's poison, isn't it? So in order to remove that sort of a subjectivity, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very clear in saying that dharma is what God says. Dharmam tu shakshat bhagavat pranitam. Right? And so therefore it is not our interpretation of dharma that is important, but it is what the book says, what the scriptures say. Now, interestingly, on dharma, I'll just take a quick sidetrack, right? A quick tangent. The motto of the Supreme Court is Yato Dharmas Tato Jaya. Where there is dharma, there is victory. Now, this phrase appears nearly 11 times in the Mahabharata under different circumstances, spoken by different personalities, including Arjuna, Kunti, Bhishma. A lot of great personalities speak this verse, Yato Dharmas Tato Jaya. And that is the motto of the Supreme Court of India, right? Now, interestingly, the Supreme Court is the only court in India to have dharma in its motto. All the other courts in India, including all the high courts of different states, they are all expected to dispense justice in accordance with law, like what is prevailing today. Right? That is because they are not supposed to be subjective. So as far as the high courts in India are concerned, when they are dispensing justice, it has to be in accordance with law. But then the Indian Constitution makes a slight deviation and exception for the Supreme Court of India. Article 142 bestows the power to the Supreme Court to do substantial justice. The word used is substantial justice, because it's only that power is only the Supreme Court, that it can go beyond law and do beyond law, but not contrary to law. Right? That's an important thing that you must keep in mind. It can go beyond law. Supposing the law doesn't provide for a situation, it can go that extra mile and ensure that substantial justice is done to the parties before it. But anyway, I mentioned that because dharma was a common factor, right? So it just crossed my mind. Anyway, back to the story, right? So here we are with King Nriga, right? He has given this cow to two Brahmanas, and both of the Brahmanas are fighting, and they have brought the dispute to the king. So what is the king doing now? The king was bound by dharma, and he realized that he had committed a blunder. So he beseeches them, please listen to me. One of you, please give up the ownership, because for the person who gives up the ownership, I will give 10,000 cows. I'll give lots of gold, diamonds. I don't mind, but this is a blunder I have committed. It will attract papa karma to me. So please give up. Either of you, please give up give up the right of ownership, because yeah, I cannot dispute it that I have given you the cow to both of you by mistake. But if you don't give it up, I will face a lot of difficulty. But then the Brahmanas do not agree to it, and in fact they allege that the king has been negligent, and a king should never be negligent. And if a king is negligent, what would happen to his prajas, his subjects in the kingdom, right? So they curse King Naga, and that is how the curse was imposed on King Niga, that he would be born as a lizard in his next birth. Okay, because this curse arose because of this dispute between the Brahmanas and this cow here. Now, due to this curse, when King Niga passed away and was taken to Yamaraj, Yamaraj, after seeing his balance sheet, that is the virtues and sins that he had committed during his life, he noticed that King Niga had done a lot of good deeds, as in karma kanda, as authorized by the Vedas, right? But then he also took cognizance of the fact that he had this curse upon him, that the curse that was cast upon him by the Brahmanas. So he gave an option to King Nega. He told King Nega, what do you want to do first? Do you want to suffer for the sin, or do you want to undergo the benefits that you have accrued by your pious life? Now, King Niga, this curse of the Brahmanas was always bothering him throughout the life, right? So King Niga chooses to undergo the curse first, and so it is that Yamaraj converts him into a lizard and puts him in this well. Uh, he remained in this well for a very long time, until Krishna came on this earth, and a few children were playing near the well one fine day, and they happened to see this lizard. And this lizard was a very big lizard. I mean, it was very disproportionate to the general size which is expected of a lizard. So they went and told Krishna, Krishna, that there is this huge lizard in the well. Come and see it with us. So Krishna goes, and then when he sees the lizard, he of course understands what happens, and he extends his left hand and touches the lizard, and with that touch, granted salvation to King Mega, right? This is the story which Srimad Bhagavatam so beautifully describes. Okay, the point that the story conveys is that in spite of doing so many pious and fruitive activities, if it is not sacrificed to Krishna, you will have, as I mentioned, the karma associated with it. So even when you think you're doing a good deed, you may end up in a position which you don't want to, which may not be very pleasant to you. That was the moral of this story. Okay. Now, coming back to another bit of philosophy, right? This is taken from the book of written by Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami is one of the recognized 6 acharyas of while tracing the disciplinic succession, right? Now, I'll just read the translation first. What is the proper understanding of renunciation? What does Krishna mean when Krishna says renounce? When persons eager to achieve liberation renounce things related to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thinking them to be material, their renunciation is incomplete. I'll give you an example of this. So, okay, I'm using this computer right now. I'm using this computer to express the message of Bhagavad Gita, right? But this computer is a material object. Now, just because it is a material object, which may cause attachment, for me to get attached to this, should I renounce it? The answer is no, because what Rupa Goswami says in this in this explanation, Bhashyam, is that it would be an incomplete renunciation. Incomplete renunciation. Why is this an incomplete renunciation? It is an incomplete renunciation because I can use this computer in a better way to serve Lord Krishna. Correct? Now, I'm trying to convey the message given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? So that is a better renunciation than me just excluding this computer itself entirely. So use the material that you have in order to please Krishna, in order to do work which is satisfying to Krishna. Satisfy Krishna with your work, and that Krishna says is better than renunciation. I'll give you another example, and this is our temple president Namanishta Prabhuji's example. Supposing you find a person who is on the weaker side of the economy. He's standing in front of the bank, and then he says, "Oh bank, I hereby renounce you." Hey, what will you think of that person? Who is he to renounce the bank? The bank does not belong to him, isn't it? Similarly, when we renounce something, what is it that we are renouncing? What is it that belongs to us for us to renounce? Everything in this world belongs to Lord Krishna. So there is nothing for us to renounce as such. On the contrary, if I use something that Krishna has deemed it fit to be given to me, that is real renunciation. Isha Upanishad gives the definition of sacrifice also. Sacrifice, Isha Upanishad says, Isha Upanishad is a part of Yajurveda. Okay. And in it, the definition of sacrifice that it gives is that it is the propensity to satisfy the senses. Sacrifice is the propensity to sacrifice the senses without Krishna in it. So as long as Krishna is not in it, it is not sacrifice. It is only sacrifice when it is done with Krishna in the background. Right. The next one is Karma Yoga or Karma Sannyasa. This is verse 5.3. Okay, how do I explain? Right. We live in a world of duality, right? We have light and day, good and evil, desire and hatred, sadness and happiness. All these constitute duality. Whenever there is a positive, there appears to be a negative. Now, Krishna says that we have to rise above this. We should neither hate nor desire the fruit. Krishna does not say that you should not do the activity. He says, do the activity. That's what he says in chapter 2, Karma Neva Adhikaraste, isn't it? What is Adhikaraste? Karma, we know, karma is activity. Adhikaraste is duty. That is where duty comes. Adhikar is duty. So Karma Neva Adhikaraste is to do your work, is your right, isn't it? So that's what when Krishna says in 2.47 that Karma Neva Adhikaraste is, he's saying that it is your right to do your duty. Now, when a person approaches a matter like that, then a person is not affected by the dualities, which I mentioned a little earlier, right? Hatred and desire, like and dislike. So when you approach work, all work is work. It is only your mental frame that makes you attach a label to it that you like to do that work or you don't like to do that work. So if you're able to remove that label, work is just work. Therefore, it is that Krishna is saying, you do work, but for work's sake. Don't attach your desire of or your dislike or your like towards that work. Okay. So how do you do this? How do you remove that label of dislike and like and attachment and renunciation? You do the work, but how is it that you're not affected by it? The answer is straight. If you do the work for Krishna, then Krishna assumes and takes over the bondage, because work done for fruitive results causes bondage, right? I mentioned this when in dealing with chapter 3. So as I mentioned again in chapter 3, Krishna says, do the work and do it in my name, and I will take care of all the karma that arises from you doing that work. Now, this is a very popular misconception when you're on the spiritual path, and it is important to remove this misconception that spirituality means renunciation. Uh, Very often we find that phrase, "Na, ye to Baba ban jayenge." So, but true spirituality isn't like that. True spirituality is service to Krishna with devotion, which is just what I mentioned. Like this computer I mentioned, the computer example. I can renounce this computer. I'll say, I don't want to use this computer. But if you use this computer to satisfy Krishna, to satisfy the purpose and goal of Krishna, and to make people more Krishna conscious, that is much better form of doing your duty than just renunciation. The renunciation also is not of the is not only for the result. it is not of the activity. That's what I wanted to mention. The renunciation, you should not attach to the activity. You should not renounce the activity. You must do the activity as a duty. It is just the result that you have to renounce, right? Now, spirituality does not mean renouncing. When talking about renouncing, spirituality also does not mean about giving up your ambitions or giving up your desires. It is just that you have to run a test. What is the test? See if your ambitions or your desires are pure, or it arises out of material danger, a material desire. If you analyze your desires and you come to the conclusion that this desire or this ambition that I have would help me satisfy Krishna, then by all means you are entitled to have your ambitions and your desires. But on the other hand, if that ambition or desire is to satisfy the senses, then it causes problems. That is when the problems arise. I'm sorry, I must have read this first actually. This is 5.3. One who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, liberated from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. The key words here is na dveshti. Na dveshti means no hate. And na kankshati. Na kankshati means na is of course no, right? So kankshati is desire. This line of na dveshti na kankshati we will also deal in chapter 18. Chapter 18 verse 41. There again you'll find this line na dveshti na kankshati, because chapter 18 is again like a summation of all that has been discussed earlier, right? So we will deal with this again in chapter 18. Next slide we'll go to. This is what the conclusion of this slide is. Renounce results, not the action. Okay, this is verse 5.6. When can you be happy? Merely renouncing all activities, yet not engaging in devotional service of the Lord, cannot make one happy. But a thoughtful person engaged in devotional service can achieve the supreme without delay. What is Krishna saying here? Merely renouncing activities does not bring anyone happiness. You may renounce, but you still have to be engaged in devotional service of the Lord. Only then can happiness be found. Now, while talking about renunciation, please understand that the goal of life is not detachment. A devotee yesterday also asked about this question: how do I detach myself from these material objects? The objective of life is not to detach yourself from material objects. The object of life is the purpose of life is to attach yourself to Krishna. On the contrary, instead of detachment, you must focus on attachment, and that attachment should be to Krishna. What happens if you are attached to Krishna? Detachment automatically follows. Once you are attached to Krishna, detachment to all the other things automatically follow. You need not renounce your families. You need not renounce your friends. In fact, you will be more attached to them because you would see Krishna in every one of them. And that should be the spirit of detachment. Because Krishna says that in every entity, living entity, he is the super soul. And that super soul is common in all of us. In every living entity, Krishna is there. Okay, the next slide. This is again another story, a quick story I'll tell you. This is the story of Srila Haridas Thakur. Srila Haridas Thakur was a great devotee of Krishna. He was a namacharya. That is, he could chant the Mahamantra without any offense. Now, he lived, I think, during the 15th or the 16th century. Okay, and because of this reputation of being a namacharya, the local headman of the village, the pradhan of the village, was envious of him. Okay? He was very jealous of him because he was very popular. So what he did was he tried to send a prostitute to his bhajan koder so that Haridas Thakur would fall, and he would be the local the headman there would be able to proclaim that this man here who claims to be a devotee of the Lord is not in fact a devotee, and he's only a charlatan, and that he is not a pure devotee, right? Now, Haridas Thakur used to chant the Lord's name in a day 3 lakh times, which is nearly about 200 malas. 200 malas calculation comes to around about 3 lakhs, right? And in that and while he was chanting the Lord's name, one night, this lady who was being sent by the local pradhan there, She comes and visits him in the middle of the night. Haridas Thakur saw her. He invited her. He invited her more cordially into his bhajan kudir and told her that he was very happy to see her. And he asked her to wait, saying that he had taken a vow to complete that number of verses. And once he is done with the number of verses, he would attend to her. Then, because Haridas Thakur seemed very inclined, this lady also was waiting for him to complete his chant. Now Haridas Thakur continued his chant. He chanted and he chanted and he chanted. And by the time he continued his chanting, dawn broke, right? And the prostitute waited all this time, and by the time it was dawn, it was too late, and so she headed back to her place. And the next day also she came. The next night also she came. And when she came again, Haridas Thakur very cordially invited her. He was very hospitable, and he profusely apologized for the previous night, saying that I could not commit it in time, complete the chanting in time. And he promises this lady that today he will try and complete the prescribed number of malas, and he would attend to her. But the same thing happened again. He kept on chanting and chanting and chanting. And by the time he came close to completion, it was dawn and she had to go. That local village headman again sent her the third night. But by this time, she was curious and asked Haridas Thakur when she came on the third night, what is it that he was doing that he could not even attend to her, because she was not used to be kept waiting, you see. Because people would attend to her immediately, because she was very beautiful woman. Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think no, sorry. Yeah, Chaitanya, this comes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, not in Srimad Bhagavatam. Very sorry. Small confusion there. Chaitanya Charitamrita gives a description, and she is stated to be very beautiful, right? So she's not used to have people keeping her waiting, right? So she gets curious. She asks Haridas Thakur, why, what is it that you're doing, that you have kept me waiting for 2 nights? No, not that I've been paid well is a different matter, but then I've been waiting here, and time is precious. So she asks him that, and then it was there. Once the question comes from this lady, what is it that you're doing? Then Haridas Thakur revealed that he knew his purpose and who had sent her, and he could have sent her away the first night itself. Then he gave her the Maha Mantra and explained the Tatparyam behind it. And he left his Bhajan Kudir to her and he moved out of it. She became a devotee and she started chanting the Maha Mantra, right? Her name was Chintamani, if I recall right. I just imagine the plight of the jealous headman. He sends someone to deviate a devotee from the right path, and that person who has been sent becomes a devotee. Such is the power of association with a pure devotee. That's why we say sadhu sangha. The power of devotee is like the sun. It purifies everything that it touches. So we must try and inculcate that habit of sadhu sangha, to associate ourselves with devotees, so that we are able to know new things, and the various aspects of Krishna's mercy. This is a very famous verse too. This is 5.10. This is where I was mentioning about the lotus leaf. The verse reads like this: one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the supreme God, is not affected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Padma Patram, that is what is a lotus leaf. This one. You see how the droplets of water appear on the lotus leaf. A devotee is like this, is like this in this world. But look at this lotus flower first. See, lotus flowers appear everywhere. Muddy waters, clean waters. It doesn't matter where it appears. It may even appear in the most dirtiest of places. But a lotus, by its very nature, never loses its charm. Correct? Have you ever seen a lotus which doesn't have charm, irrespective of where it is? A devotee is like that. Wherever the devotee is, he doesn't interact with the world in such a way that he permits the world to influence him. He is in his own space, as they say these days, right? And as an extension of that is this example of this lotus leaf. You see the droplets of water I was mentioning. These droplets of water, it appears as if it is on the lotus leaf, but it also appears that it is not on the lotus leaf, isn't it? And that is how Krishna says that you must lead your life. You must be in the world, but you must also not be in the world. And that is the clear instruction. It says, do your duty, but do it without attachment. How do you do it without attachment? You will do it without attachment if you surrender the results to Krishna. Then you will not be affected by sinful action. Just like I mentioned about the lotus leaf, right? So let's go to the next slide. This is an ideal example of how to lead life as the water on the lotus leaf, droplets of water on the lotus leaf. This is a scene from Bhajan in San Francisco at the initial stages of the foundation of ISKCON, right? And Srila Prabhupada, as I was saying, is an ideal example of detachment. This video was shot at the Golden Gate Park at San Francisco. That's where, yeah, right. San Francisco is where the Golden Gate Bridge is, right? So yes, this is where it has a park apparently. So this is that video. Let me just play this, right? Srila Prabhupada here is chanting with hippies. Is it audible? It's not playing yet. Just a second. Sorry. What was the point of playing this video? Did you see the ecstasy in the faces of the people who are participating in the kirtan? Srila Prabhupada, when he came to Boston, when he arrived at Boston, he was trying to spread the message of Krishna. He was amongst drug addicts and drunkards. In fact, there is in the biography of Srila Prabhupada, there are several descriptions where he had to, while climbing stairs, cross over drunken people in stupor, right? So he had to associate himself with people like those. But then he was never affected. Why was he not affected? Because he was a devotee, isn't it? Though he was in this world, he was still not a part of it. He was detached from it. He was doing his devotional service for Krishna with utmost sincerity. He would have felt the same as if he was in the temple, even in the midst of all those hippies and drug addicts and drunkards, right? So, uh, but yet he was successful in transforming those hippies into happies. I mean, you could see the ecstasy that those hippies were under, right? You could see happiness on their face when they participate in this kirtan. Let's proceed further. Yes, this is another very popular phrase, a very popular sloka. 5.18. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and a gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. Dog eater means outcast, right? So humble, right? Humble is the first. It starts with humble. Humble, we use it a little loosely in English. I mean, when I say we, I meant in English. It describes someone who is meek, a non-assertive person, correct? But when Krishna uses it here, he doesn't mean humble in that sense as we understand it. Well, what he means is one who has true knowledge. It's not just humbleness, humility, as we understand. It's just beyond that. A person who has true knowledge. That is what is the meaning of humble here, humble sage. Okay. Krishna says that this humble sage is such a person that by true knowledge, he is able to see a Brahman, a gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater as the same. He treats them as the same. Now, how do you consider an outcast, a person who the society will not even entertain? to be in that society? How do you treat him to be on the same pedestal as a learned Brahmana? Because this humble sage who has true knowledge, he sees them as the same because of the existence of the super soul in all of them. Because the sage, this humble sage, he knows that the super soul is in all those entities. The super soul is living in all those entities. And who is the super soul? He is an expansion of Krishna. He is Garbhodak, no, sorry, he's the Shirodaksha Vishnu. One of the expansions of the, yesterday I was telling you, right? As far as society has inculcated in us, we know that there are that Vishnu had incarnated as Krishna and so forth, right? He's the eighth avatar. Krishna is treated to be the in common knowledge. Krishna is treated to be the eighth avatar of Vishnu, but it is actually the other hand. It's on the other hand. It is Krishna who expands into Vishnu, and not just one Vishnu. He actually goes into three kinds of Vishnus. One is Mahavishnu, the other is Sriyodaksha Vishnu, which is the super soul in all the living entities. The other one is Garbhodaksha Vishnu. We will deal with all this in chapter 8. There's an entire chart on Goloka, on heavenly planets and their position in chapter 8. So we will deal with it when we are dealing with chapter 8. But just understand that there are three Vishnus. It's not just one. And it is not Vishnu who incarnated as Krishna, but it was Krishna who expanded as Vishnu. Now, the key word here in this sloka is Pandita Samadarshinaha. That is the one who sees all with an equal eye. Sama is equal and Darshana is see. Right? Next slide. Yes, 5.22. This is an intelligent person does not take part in the source of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Let me just take this off a little. Okay, now let me just see what is the important phrases in this. But before that, a few examples of this verse. See, Krishna is saying that a self-realized person is always happy with himself and by himself. So his happiness does not depend on an external element, right? But on the other hand, a material person is also trying to be happy. That is the nature of the soul. The soul wants to be happy. By the very nature, the soul is happy. So, but then what is the difference between happiness of a self-realized person and the happiness and of a person who is not self-realized? That is what this sloka deals with. Boga here means enjoyment. Samsprashtaja is contact with material nature, material elements, material nature as such. Dukkha is misery, and Yonaya is origin, I think. Yes, origin. Adi of course is also origin, and Antavanta is end, right? So Krishna says that enjoyment derived by the contact with material nature. What are the three material natures? That is acting in conformity to one of those. That is Sattvic, Tamasic, and Rajasic, right? So if your happiness is derived from these three material elements, by your contact with these three material elements, such happiness is not true happiness. It is actually misery, because that happiness has a beginning and it has an end. That's what Adi and Antavanta, right? Now, let's take food as an example, right? We all like to have food. It's what keeps us alive, after all. Now, you take food and you eat it. It gives you enjoyment. It has a beginning, and when you swallow it, the enjoyment ends. But then you want to have more, and in order to prolong the enjoyment, right? But then when you're not able to have more, that causes frustration, and frustration leads to misery. Now, here food comes into contact with the sense of taste, isn't it? And that is what gives you enjoyment. So that is what is the problem, because when it comes into contact with your sense of taste, you derive enjoyment from it. But then when it withdraws itself, when it goes down the throat, you lose that sense of enjoyment, and therefore it is that you feel you have lost something, right? When it's over, you want more, and if you don't get more, you feel misery. Now, Krishna says in the sloka that such an enjoyment is temporary. And a wise man should not, a person who wants to be wise at least, he should not derive enjoyment from such pleasures. It is materialistic and it is impermanent, asaswatam, right? But on the other hand, Krishna says realization of the self and divinity, and realization of the divinity is actually is true happiness. That is what brings eternal and unlimited happiness, as in contradistinction to happiness which comes out of contact with the material nature. It is happiness which you get when you understand yourself and the divine. That happiness is eternal. That's what Krishna is saying in this, and also in 5.21 actually. But 5.21, I had to, because this was more on the point, I had to choose this. Right now, let's just have a few examples of this. Now, these are moths, right? These are moths. We all know, we have seen in the rainy season when there's a strong light, these moths are always attracted to that light because of their sense of sight, isn't it? So what happens when they are attracted to the sense of light? They get electrocuted and they die. So they become undone because they are acting in furtherance of the sense, because they want to enjoy the sense of sight. Right, then let's next one. This is a deer. This is also another example for the sense of hearing. You see, deers are very fond of sounds. They are very inquisitive in the sense, whenever there's any sound, they want to explore what is going on. Right, so a deer would tend to stop when it hears a different kind of sound. So hunters exploit this feature of the deer to in order to hunt them. So the unbecoming of this animal is because it entertains its sense of smell, sorry, sense of hearing, right? And then the next one is about bees. Okay, bees are attracted by their sense of taste. A bait, for example, they go to collect honey, right, from the flowers, but not all flowers are safe, because there are flowers which also close up on them when they try and collect the honey from the flowers. So the unbecoming of the bee is its sense of smell rather, not taste. Bees don't taste their honey, right? It's pollen, it comes from pollen. Anyway, it's the sense of smell actually. This is the one for taste. This is when this is about fish, big fish eating the small fish, as it's popularly said. See, in the ocean or in the sea or in the pond, even there are hundreds of fish, right? And a fish, if it wants to be free, it must go and hunt, and it must get the fish which is active. But what happens when a human goes fishing? He uses a bait, right? So this fish sees bait and it thinks it is easy food, and it goes and tries and eats it, and it gets caught in the hook, right? So the unbecoming of this fish is its laziness. Apart from that, mainly the sense of taste. And the last one is this elephant, which deals with the sense of touch, because hunters, poachers use a female elephant to trap a male elephant. They use the female elephant. They first dig a pit, and then they use the female elephant to lure the male elephant, and they train the female elephant to bypass the pit, but then the male elephant falls into the pit and it is caught. So the unbecoming of the elephant is its sense of touch. Now, for animals, only one sense is prominent, but for us, all the senses are prominent. And when all the senses are prominent, that causes more problems. We chase one sense gratification after another. And after one sense gratification is not enough for us. We keep looking for more, and we are never satisfied. We keep wanting more and more, isn't it? But then what is our saving grace? Animals don't have the process of rational thinking, but we have rational thought. We have intelligence, and we have to use that intelligence. Why has Krishna given you that intelligence and given you this human form? In this verse, as says Krishna, intelligence, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery. So you have to use that intelligence that Krishna has given to discriminate between the enjoyment which you derive from entertaining senses and the enjoyment that you derive in knowing the self and the divine. The problem is most of us know this, but we do not employ it in our day-to-day lives, isn't it? We know that our happiness depends upon external factors. We are happy when we buy a new iPhone. We are happy when we buy a new computer. That your happiness should not depend on those material objects. Your happiness must derive from the fact that you are getting to know Krishna better. So it is that which gives you eternal happiness. Krishna also deals with this in chapter 7, verse 33, if I'm not wrong, where he says that among thousands, only one can really understand Krishna. And therefore, it is that one of the reasons that humans don't venture into deriving happiness from divinity is because of the effort that one has to put in order to derive that benefit, right? It requires always some amount of effort and dedication and sacrifice from the part of the devotee. As I was mentioning yesterday, you have to take that first step. Without taking that first step, Krishna is happy to leave you to your free will. He has given you the message. Now whether you act in accordance with that message is up to you. There's another misconception that spirituality is for old people. And it is always better that only old people are involved in spirituality, because otherwise a young person may fail in his duties if he feels he has to move closer to God when he is young, right? See, but not, that is entirely incorrect. Death can come at any time. Srimad Bhagavatam says padam padam vipadam. That is there is danger in every step. Padam padam is step, right? Vipadam is danger. So there is danger in every step. Misery is there in every step. So the time to take the spiritual path is now. uh, don't wait for old age. Old age is not a qualification to be spiritual, right? We do not know what is going to happen in our old age. We may lose our ability to speak. Then how will you chant? You may be in a coma. We never know. Anything can happen. What will you do at that stage? But we know what is happening with us today. We know what is happening with us now. So now is the best time to engage ourselves in spiritual practices, to adopt the spiritual truth. Okay, question for the class. Who knows the definition of old age? What is old age? Mataji, can you please open up the chat? Let's see. I really like to see what the devotees think about old age. How can you define old age? Let's see what the chat says. Please post. Approaching death. Jyoti Mataji says approaching death. Very nice, Mataji. Actually, that is actually very close to the correct answer. Lots of experience about life, experience, inability to do things on own. Is that own? Okay, that's one feature of old age. Okay, now they are coming in. One who resigns irrespective of stage, final stages of life, the last milestone. Very nice. When you don't wish to do anything, it is just a number. Okay, that's what is very popular these days. Age is just a number. Body gets terrified to do things. Physical aging, saturation. Old age is a gradual decrease in life energy, right? So yeah, all answers are correct from different perspectives. Okay, but I was hoping for a more profound answer. But what does the Srimad Bhagavatam say? Srimad Bhagavatam, while Prahalad, Bhakt Prahalad speaks in Srimad Bhagavatam, he gives an explanation for old age. Old age is any time before death. Any time before that, because death can come at any time. So you are always in your old age, because we never know when death is going to come. And this, I think, is in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why perhaps in English, when you ask for someone's age, you ask how old are you. You don't ask how young are you. Generally, I mean, now it is coming into practice of how young you are, but generally throughout the ages we have been always asking how old are you, and then when the person replies, he says, I am 20 years old, I am 40 years old. So why is that word old used there? Because perhaps it is because that it is a reminder for you that you are getting old. So time does not wait for anyone. So therefore, adopt the spiritual path. Like that. But then what do we do once we know this? It's not something new. See, Krishna, these are all things that we have. Being in India, of course, if you're born in the Western nations, perhaps these may not be known to us. But we are lucky enough to be born in India, right? So somehow society thankfully introduces these concepts to us. We know of these concepts vaguely, but then we know it, we don't adopt it. That's the problem. We break the four regulative principles. And what are the four regulative principles? I mentioned yesterday in the question and answer session. I call it the Grimm principle, GRIM. And why is it the Grimm principle? Because these are things that you should be grim about. You should not break them. What does G stand for? G stands for gambling. You are not to gamble, because you never win in a gamble. You may win once or twice, but in a long run, you will never win in gambling, and that causes so much destruction to your life that it is very hard to come back from that addiction, right? But now, R is GR, right? R is no relationship outside marriage. That is adultery. You should never indulge in adultery, either of the sexes. uh, why marriage is a sacrament in Hinduism. In our culture, marriage is is a sacrament. It's not a contract. That we should always keep that in mind. When you get married, you accept in front of Agni that you will keep up your promises to to your spouse. So it is that it is forbidden to have any other relationship outside marriage. And I mean sexual relationship very specifically, explicitly. I mean sexual relationship outside marriage is entirely forbidden, right? So the I, what is I? I is intoxication. Intoxication in any form, even coffee for that matter, coffee or tea. I mean generally when people talk about intoxication, they think of alcohol, they think of drugs. But then we are sometimes there are people who when they wake up, they cannot be without their first cup of coffee. They have to have coffee or tea first, and it is without that their day does not dawn. So even this is amounting to intoxication. Okay. And GRIM, right? M is for meat. No meat. You should not eat non-vegetarian. That's pretty evident, because we know the advantages of not eating meat. One of the popular misconceptions is that if you don't eat meat, you will not get adequate protein or animal fats, and therefore your body will become weak. That's entirely incorrect. Science has proven that a vegetarian diet is much more healthier. It suits the body much more healthier, and this conception is entirely a misconceived notion that you need meat to to maintain your body properly. So please remember the Grimm principles. You should be grim about it, right? You should never negotiate. These principles are not negotiable. Okay, this is verse 5.29. Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam. Yes. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all the planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of mental misery. Bhoktaram means enjoyer. Krishna says that he is the enjoyer of all sacrifices. Yajna is sacrifice. Bhoktaram Yajna is Krishna is the enjoyer of all sacrifices, and tapasam is austerities, right? So Krishna says, as I was saying, that he is the enjoyer of all the sacrifices and austerities. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. What is this? Krishna is the Lord of the entire creation, not just this world. This world, the other planets in the Milky Way, the local galaxy, then the local cluster, the entire universe. He is the Lord of the entire universe, and not just one universe. There's so many universes. Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 1 deals with creation, and it explains. Okay, that's this picture itself. It explains how these universes came out of Vishnu. So Canto 1 deals with creation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Suhridam is best friend. Suhridam is best friend. There are three kinds of friendship dealt with in Mahabharata itself. Um, Mitra, Bandhu, and Suhridam. Mitra is there is difference in degrees. Let's just leave it at that. Okay. And Santim Rachati is attain peace. So who attains peace? The person who realizes that Krishna is the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, and who realizes that he is the supreme Lord, and who also realizes that he is the well-wisher of all living entities, will attain freedom from pangs of material misery, right? But before I conclude this session, there's something I ought to have mentioned here. See, this is actually the peace formula, because Krishna says how Krishna gives out the secret to attain peace. The word used here is to attain peace, right? So how this is also called as the peace formula. I must have mentioned it in the beginning. This peace formula is, if you understand of all those three elements I mentioned, right? You understand that he is the enjoyer of the benefits, that he is the Lord of the universe, and he is the well-wisher the um, of all living entities. Now, you cannot exclude Krishna and aim to have peace. It is simply not possible. And the only way that you can have peace is to recognize this, to understand this. Once you understand this, then it becomes easier. You attain peace automatically. And you should also know that there is no peace unless you surrender to the Lord. You should recognize him as Parabrahma, as Paradharma, Paramdama, Parandama, Parabrahma, Parandama. Unless you recognize him as Parabrahma and Parandama, there can be no peace. Then what must you do? Then you must sacrifice your work for him. Then render devotional service. Then you should develop jnana of his transcendental activities and get onto the platform of Krishna consciousness by the mercy of gurus and acharyas. All this will lead to peace. And with that, we can conclude this chapter. But the session is not complete, because just recap quickly what we have learned. So Arjuna starts off this chapter with the question whether it's sannyasa or karma yoga, which is better. Krishna says karma yoga is better than sannyasa. And then we saw freedom from bondage. And then we saw about liberation by focusing on the Supreme, right? And we can end this chapter now, but then please stand by for the bhajan. And after bhajan, as I mentioned in the beginning, please give me 10 minutes, not more than 10 minutes. I will explain the Tatparyam and the reason why the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the anthem of the Krishna movement. Okay, so please stay in the group. Please stay. Please don't leave. Hare Krishna Mataji. But let me just complete the session first. Let's play our respects to our Guru Acharyas. Om Angyana Timirandasya Jnananjana Slakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Vaishnava Pranam. Vancha Kalpata Rubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Today I was hopefully able to maintain some time limit. Thank you. Please, as I mentioned, please do stay back for the explanation. I'll just stop sharing now. Mataji, please take over.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I'm sharing this one. Please, Prabhuji. Please, thank you.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Adharam madhuram vadanam madhuram nayanam madhuram hasitam madhuram hrudayam madhuram gamanam madhuram madhuradhipate rakhilam madhuram vachanam madhuram cheritam madhuram vasanam madhuram valitam madhuram chilitam madhuram brahmitam madhuram madhuradhipate रखिलं मधुरं वेणुर्मधुरो रेणुर्मधुरा पाणिर्मधुरा पादौ मधुरौ नृत्यं मधुरं सख्यं मधुरं मधुराधिपतेरखिलं मधुरं गीतं मधुरं पीतं मधुरं पुक्तं मधुरं सुप्तं मधुरं रूपं मधुरं तिलकं मधुरं मधुराधिपते रखिलं मधुरं करणं मधुरं तरणं मधुरं हरणं मधुरं स्मरणं मधुरं वमितं मधुरं शमितं मधुरं मधुराधिपते रखिलं मधुरं कुञ्जा मधुरा माला मधुरा यमुना मधुरा वीची मधुरा सलिलं मधुरं कमलं मधुरं मधुराधिपते रखिलं मधुरं गोपी मधुरा लीला मधुरा युक्तं मधुरं मुक्तं मधुरं दृष्टं मधुरं शिष्टं मधुरं मधुराधिपते रखिलं मधुरं दृष्टं मधुरं शिष्टं मधुरं मधुराधिपते रखिलं मधुरं गोपा मधुरा गावो मधुरा यष्टिर्मधुरा सृष्टिर्मधुरा दलितं मधुरं फलितं मधुरं मधुराधिपतेरखिलं मधुरं 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 अखिलं मधुरं मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं Hare Krishna.
Wonderful, Prabhuji. Wonderful. It was really very, very nice. Just a few words, devotees. Madhurashtakam.
Thank
This is a. Okay, let me just explain what is Ashtakam. Ashtakam means it's a poem of 8 stanzas. Okay, so this is called the Madhurashtakam. It was composed by Vallabhacharya. Okay, and as I mentioned, Ashtakam means Ashta is 8, right? So Ashtakam is made of 8 stanzas. It's a genre of lyrical poetry, right? And this poem is about the beauty of Krishna, the beauty of the activities of Krishna. It's a very, very wonderfully sung, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Everywhere you get Madhura, right? Madhur means Madhur. Madhur means beautiful. Madhu is honey. So the common thread that runs in that 8 stanzas is that everything about the Lord is beautiful. And he is the Adipati. Adipati is the Godhead of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is all sweetness. That's the meaning, the broad meaning of Madhurashtakam. This from it starts from his lips. It describes the Lord. It describes the Lord in quite detail, and it says at every description it says it's so beautiful. He's so sweet. Just a quick description so that you understand actually what is going on. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It was very nice. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
We can continue now, okay, with the remainder of why the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the anthem. I'll just share my screen. 1 second. Come out of this first. Just bear with me for a second, please. Clear? Visible?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Let's just go to the relevant slide in a moment. Okay. So we'll start from here. Now, as promised yesterday, we are now going to examine the beauty of the Maha Mantra, right? Nehamataji, Nehamataji,
Yes, Prabhuji.
can you please unmute, permit the devotees to unmute themselves? We can chant once the Maha Mantra and then we can go on to we can chant it once together, just the two lines, and then we can go on to explain.
2 lines, Sana.
Then Prabhuji.
Please chant with me, devotees. One round of Hare Krishna. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Okay. Now, you would have noticed this picture, right? Yeah, this is the one of the mantras that I start. I utter before I start the session. You would have seen this picture associated along with this mantra. This mantra is called the Pancha Tattva mantra. Why is it Pancha? Pancha is 5, right? So there are 5 people here. So it's the 5. Tattva is principle. Tattva means principle. Okay. And mantra is, what is man? Mantra is a combination of 2 words in Sanskrit. Man is the mind and tra means protection. Okay. So this is the principles of the 5 and which protects. Okay. Now, I chant this before I chant the Maha Mantra, and that is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, right? And why is it that we should chant this before we chant the Maha Mantra? See, what happens when we chant the Maha Mantra, sometimes we get disturbed in between, right? We are interrupted when we're chanting, or sometimes we are not able to complete the entire 108 times that you're supposed to chant. So though these are bhakti chants, right? So bhakti chants are not very strict about their pronunciation. They are not very strict about the time that the number of times. But then you cannot take it to your advantage. You cannot chant once and then intending to complete an entire mala, you continue it after some time. Now these are treated to be aparadas. Okay. So we chant the Panchatantra mantra in order to protect us from our from apadaras. Aparadas. Okay, aparadas. I'm just missing the pronunciation completely. So the point is this: when we chant this mantra, it protects us from any sins that may happen or mistakes that may commit in the chanting. Now let us examine who these personalities here in the picture are. Okay. Okay. Yesterday we saw chapter 4, right? We saw the verse Paritranaya Sadhunam. Paritranaya Sadhunam ends with the line Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. Krishna says he comes, he keeps coming yuga after yuga, isn't it? That's what it means. Sambhavami Yuge Yuge means he comes year yuga after yuga. How does Krishna come? He takes avatars, correct? Yesterday, I also mentioned about the different kinds of avatars. Now, we know that, or at least we were under the impression that there are 10 avatars of Vishnu. There are actually 6 classifications of incarnations itself. It's not just 10 avatars. It is actually 6 classifications. There are 6 headings in which an avatara can happen. For example, there is something called the Purusha Avatara, in which Krishna has taken the avatar thrice. Then there is something called the Guna Avatara, in which Krishna has come again 3 times. Then there is Leela Avatara. Leela Avatara is a classification where Krishna appearance is many times he has come. There is Manvantra, where he has come 14 times. So there are classifications according to the pastimes of Krishna and the duties that he does in that avatara, right? So the point is that the Lord has come many times, and this concept of 10 avatars is not the complete picture. Okay. Similarly, Krishna has already appeared in the Kali Yuga. He has appeared 500 years ago. Now, how do you know that? How do you identify a person as an avatara when he claims that he is God? the first thing you do is you look for pramanas in the Shastras, proof in the Shastras, right? In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 5, verse 32, there is this verse. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead who constantly sings the name of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Now let us see this picture. Okay, the person in the middle is Krishna Swayam. His name is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, 500 years ago in Navadvip, which is near Calcutta, Mayapur, in West Bengal, is the place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was born. There is evidence for this in the Shastra. The Shastras actually say that his name, his mother's name would be Sati. And it goes on to explain the family in which he would be born, in which Krishna would take up as the next avatar. So there is pramanas for this. I've not taken that out, but then this I thought would serve the purpose. What does the word say? It says that Krishna here it would not be blackish in color. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's color, it was described in Chaitanya Charitamritham that he is golden in color. Therefore, he is also called as Gauranga. Gaura means gold, also fair, and Anga means body. Okay, so this is one of the pramanas that we can, which tells us that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna Swayam. Okay, then. But then history has a slightly different twist of the different take on the matter. In so far as history is concerned, history books say that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a poet. He was a proponent of the Bhakti movement. He popularized the Bhakti movement. That's what the history books say. But then if you look at the pramanas, the proof in the Shastras, and Shastras of course are way older than our history books. We get clear indication of clear notifications that Krishna would take avatar as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, when Krishna comes, does he come alone? Did he come alone when he came as Krishna? He had an entire entourage with him. Did he come alone when he had Rama? When he came as Rama? For example, when the Prime Minister goes to visit a foreign land, does he go alone? He takes an entire set of people with him, isn't it? He is accompanied by his bodyguards. He is accompanied by people who are helping him, who are serving him. Similarly, when Krishna comes, he is also accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Here, he is accompanied by four of them. The picture shows four of them, right? Now, let's see who each one of them is. The person on the right of Krishna, who's wearing blue, where is the pointer? Right, who's wearing blue, his name is Nityananda. He is also called as Nitai. He is Balaram. He is Balaram, as when Krishna was accompanied by Balaram, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was accompanied by Nityanand, who is none other than Balaram. Now, the person next to Balaram, Nityananda, in white, who has his hands together, he is Advaita Acharya. He is a combination of Vishnu and Shiva together. That's why he is called Sadashiva. His name is but Advaita Acharya. Now we take the other side. To Krishna's left, you see a person wearing orange, right? Here, his name is Gadadhara Pandit. He is an incarnation of Radharani. Krishna never leaves Radha anywhere he goes. So he is the incarnation of Radharani. And okay, I'll come to that a little later. And the person next to Radharani, that is Gadadhara Pandit, is Srivasa. Srivasa Acharya. Now he is the incarnation of Narada Muni. Right? So the point is that Krishna never comes alone. He always comes with his associates. So is it that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu created the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and that is why ISKCON has adopted it as its anthem? Is that so? Is it because it is an invention of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who we say is an incarnation of Krishna Swayam? We saw in yesterday's class that Bhagavan tu Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. That is Dharma to Shakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. That is, Dharma is what God says it is. We saw it today also, in today's class also. Dharma cannot be changed. So 500 years ago, it is not as if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu God created the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. That would be incorrect, right? Now let us see the reason why that is not the case. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is the I'll tell you what it is in a moment. Okay, Chaitanya Charitamrita is a grantha. It is a book. Okay, in it, all the activities and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are mentioned. Right? It's like a biography. It is written after he has left the world. Now, when we study that, generally what we do is we first start with the Bhagavad Gita, which is what we are doing now, right? Now, after you get little familiar with the principles of Bhagavad Gita, we move on and we start reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, that is like the post graduation course. Bhagavad Gita is the graduation course. Srimad Bhagavatam is the post graduation course, and Chaitanya Chaitanya Charitamrita is the PhD level course. Okay. Now, in this course, in the Madhya Leela, so Chaitanya Charitamrita has 3 volumes. One is Adi Leela, Madhya Leela, and the Antya Leela. Okay. Now, in the Madhya Leela, this is what's said, right? In the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the only means of deliverance is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. There is no other way. There is no other way. There is no other way. Harer Nama Kevalam. There is no other way. You have to chant the name of the Lord. Okay. Now, why is it repeated thrice? Whenever we have, this is an established rule, right? It's called the rule of 3. Whenever there is anything important or significant to be mentioned, it is repeated thrice. For example, you will know in courts, as shown in movies, they say things 3 times. When they call a witness, they repeat the name 3 times because it is important to know who is deposing, right? Just as an example. But then when it's repeated thrice, it means what is said it's very important. Okay. So as this verse says, it is the only means of deliverance is the chanting of the holy names of the Lord in the Kali Yuga, which plays in Kali Yuga, which is an age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Let's go to the next slide. This is again in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Whatever result can be obtained in Satya Yuga by meditating on Vishnu, in Treta Yuga by performing sacrifices, and in Dwapara Yuga by serving the Lord's lotus feet, can be obtained in the Kali Yuga simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The Srimad Bhagavatam says this in as many words, right? Now we go on to a little less known shastras. This is the Brahan Naridiya Purana. Whatever is achieved by meditation in Satya Yuga, by performance of sacrifice in Treta Yuga, and by worship of Krishna's lotus feet in Dwapara Yuga, is obtained in the age of Kali simply by glorifying the name of Lord Keshava. Right now, we'll go to the next slide. There are so many slides that I have gathered, nearly 8 or 9 of them, which each one is proof in itself. See, these cannot be challenged. They have withstood the test of time. And no one has been able to show these texts to be false, right? So these are absolute truths. It means the truth stated in them is not negotiable. You can't say, yeah, the first part of it appears to be true, but the second part may not be correct. You can't say that. The entire thing has to be taken to be as true, okay? And the third one is from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. That in the age of Kali, the practices of austerity, yoga, meditation, deity worship, sacrifice, and so on, along with their various subsidiary functions, are not properly carried out, even by the most expert embodied souls. Expert embodied souls means us humans, because we have a soul and we have a body. We are called embodied souls. Okay. Now, yesterday itself, I had mentioned this, that in the Kali Yuga, we are all Shudras. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Kalo Shudra Sambhavaha. That is, Srimad Bhagavatam actually predicts it, that when we reach the Kali Yuga, the Varnashram system will get corrupted, and all the people will start hankering after material nature, material senses, and they will run after money. So it is that it is said that in Kali Yuga, because the other three varnas, the other three classifications are not in existence, everybody is a Shudra, and that is what is happening, isn't it? If you see general populace, everybody is running after money, isn't it? So it is that this is also says that in the Kali Yuga, you won't have all these. Even the most expert, the most devoted souls would find it difficult to do things which have been done in the previous yugas. And therefore, it is the chanting is the most easiest for this yuga. Now, this is from the Skanda Purana. In this way, the most perfect penance to be executed in the world is the chanting of the name of Lord Sri Hari. Especially in the age of Hari, in the age of Kali, one can satisfy the Supreme Lord Vishnu by performing Sankirtana. What is the difference between Sankirtana and Japa? Japa is when you chant to yourself, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This is Japa. Now, when you sing it along with others, it is Sankirtana. That's why there's Sangeet in it. So it's called Sankirtana. There you go a little slower. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So you see the difference between Sankirtana and Japa. Japa is what you do with your when you chant to yourself. Sankirtana is when you share the joy with others, and Sankirtana is way better than just doing japa, just chanting to yourself. So it is that you find in temples, in ISKCON temples, that there is a huge hall in the main place where the deity is itself. The hall is always very big because they want to encourage the devotees to indulge themselves in Sankirtana. Okay, so I've shown you these slides, right? Now we still haven't seen where is the Maha Mantra coming from. As I said in the beginning, was it something which was invented by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Was it something that he had written down, and because he had written down, ISKCON had adopted it, or was it something which ISKCON itself had created it in order to propagate Krishna consciousness? It's like Nescafe's adage. Each advertisement has that catchphrase, no? Like Coca-Cola has "Be happy" or "Enjoy the freshness," and so on. But it is not so. That's not the case. Let's see where the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra comes from. Okay, now this is the Kali Santarna Upanishad. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Iti Shodasakam Namam, Kali Kalmasha Nasnam, right? So this Kali Santarna Upanishad is a conversation. All Upanishads are conversations. Now this Kali Santarna Upanishad is a conversation between Brahma and Narada. That is father and son. Okay, like Bhagavad Gita is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. Upanishads are all like that. In fact, the Gita is called the Gita Upanishad, isn't it? Because it's a conversation. Now Narada, that is the son, asks the father Brahma. He asks, what will happen to the people of Kali Yuga? How will they elevate their consciousness? Is the question that Narada asks to Brahma, and Brahma, in reply to that question, says this sloka, right? And what is the meaning of this? The 16 words, Sodashakam means 16. The 16 words of Hare Krishna Maha Mantra are especially meant for counteracting the sins of Kali Yuga. To save oneself from contamination of Kali Yuga, there is no other alternative but to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. After searching through all the Vedic scriptures, one cannot find a method of religion for this age, Kali Yuga, so sublime as to the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So who has told this to whom? Brahma has told this to Narada, that Hare Krishna, that is this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is what is most suitable for as a way of religion in this Kali Yuga. So it's not something which is of recent origin. It's not what ISKCON created 50 years back, or it's not what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu created 500 years back. It has survived through the ages. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just made it famous. Therefore, it is associated with him. And since ISKCON's teaching is based on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, this Mahamantra has been adopted by ISKCON. And also because, more importantly, as Brahma says in the Kalisantarna Upanishad, after searching through all Vedic scriptures, Vedic literature is tremendous. There is so many things to learn under the Vedas. And Brahma is Chaturvedi, right? So he knows all the 4 Vedas. And after searching all the 4 Vedas, Brahma says, the most learned person says, that there is no other mantra for Kali Yuga than the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And that is why the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is the anthem of ISKCON. And because it delivers people from the evils of Kali. I hope now that makes it a little clearer. And therefore, what would I usually say to confirm to end the session? Please chant. Try chanting one round 108 times this Mahamantra, 16 words into 108 times. That is all. It will take 10 minutes, as I was mentioning yesterday. Do it once, at least till the end of this program, this 18 days program. Then you will not be able to stop, because we still have quite some time. We are still not completed the first 1/3 itself. So once you start doing it till the end of this, you will not be able to drop it, because you will feel the bliss that occurs when you start chanting. Okay, now we can go on to the, and thank you so much for staying back. We still have quite a strong strength who have stayed back to know of why the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is so important in the Kali Yuga, especially. Hare Krishna. We can go on to the next portion, Mataji. Let me stop.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Sandhya Mataji, you can
Just
unmute
just one moment. Let me just.
yes, Prabhuji.
My Bluetooth, something is wrong with it, so I have to stick to wires now. Hare Krishna. Am I audible now?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Let's get started.
Hare Krishna, Sandhya Mataji, you can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna. Today's takeaway is the source of misery is the desire for satisfaction of material senses.
Mhm. Correct.
And my question is, how does a person develop either of the 3 material states in one's life?
It's based on karma, Mataji. Straightforward.
It is based on the karma of
Yeah.
the past life.
Yes.
And in the present life, is there a chance for the person to change the...
Yes. That's the entire idea of karma, isn't it? You consciously do things to accrue. See, we are talking about the material nature. So my answer has to be taken in that background. When you're acting within the boundaries of material nature, the more good things you do, the better nature, the better kind of material nature you would be able to attain. That is, it is generally understood that tamasic is the worst. Better is rajasic. More better is I'm not using the word best. Please keep that in mind. More better, I'm saying. Okay, that's not a word actually. It's not a phrase. But anyway, more better is sattvic. So among the 3, sattvic is better. A little worse is rajasic, and below that is tamasic, right? Now, consciously, if you avoid doing the tamasic activities, that is acting in the mode of ignorance, and while you consciously take efforts to act in the mode of goodness, you start accruing good karma. But see, but that acts only within the material boundaries of material nature. Krishna says you have to surrender to me and come beyond this material nature. You have to come out of this circle of material nature, and that is the purpose of the soul, to go to Krishna. Okay, to serve Krishna. And therefore it is that we have to not limit ourselves to acting in a good sense, in good way. We have to act in a way that Krishna has prescribed, right? So it is that I did not use the word best. Best is the word you use when you come out of the material modes of nature. So if you want a simple answer to your question, straightforward answer is it depends upon karma, and it is susceptible to be changed by acting with knowledge that you don't want to act in the mode of ignorance, but you want to act in the mode of goodness. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Ramanjan Prabhuji, you can unmute yourself. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Rama, right? So what
Hare
is that Hare meaning that we?
Hare is the potency of Lord Krishna. It's there is a huge amount of literature, and if I start, it'll take the entire day. Just understand that it is the power potential and the power potency and the pleasure potency of the Lord. I simply, you can say otherwise. Hare is Radha Rani herself. Hare is Radha Rani herself, which is the pleasure potency, but it is not just the pleasure potency. It is much more than that. That's why it's Hare Krishna and then it's Hare Rama. Hare Rama is again the pleasure potency of Rama. So for this stage, as a beginner, this would be adequate, because see, in order to explain more complicated concepts, I have to build a base for that, isn't it? Only then I can take you to that next stage. For this stage, please understand that it is the potency of Krishna. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Sukhsen Prabhuji, you can unmute yourself.
Hello,
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Ji, you are talk about that vegetarian food.
Yes. Yes.
We heard about like sattvic and other things.
Yes.
So in that, what you have said is really true when it comes to the realistic life.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
what are the rich proteins or what are the equivalent food? Even today's trend, there are social challenges. A lot of food, they are all talk about all non-veg. We know many like vegetarian food is the a right food for the human, but people are like due to various changes as well as the Western culture, as we told, it is all adopted. Now, what are the food we need to eatable? This kind of like viral infection, all those things. We are all talk about only the non-veg. Many people, even we are seeing doctors is preferably they are choosing that non-veg food. They are telling that. So, what is the right food we have to eat for a vegetarian in Krishna's way? Or Bhagavad, what is saying?
Okay, there are quite several questions in your okay, but I'll just broadly answer it. Good
Okay.
food is the Indian food. Indian food is the best food. Any Indian food, any South Indian food, idli, dosas, all good. It's all good. All food is good food if you offer it to Krishna and then partake of it. That is all. It's straightforward. Yeah, of course, you'll have to avoid explicitly tamasic items like onion and garlic. Okay, though they are vegetarian, they come under the banner of vegetarian. They promote tamasic or the big mode of ignorance, right? So I don't want to go into the details of which food has which better protein and all that, because that's not this platform is not for that. This is we are on a much higher pedestal, right? So the point that I want to convey was all food is good food. Dal chawal is good, roti chawal is good, roti dal is good. As I said, idli, dosa, idiyappam, uttapam is all food is good food. You just offer it to Krishna before you eat. Krishnarpanam, that is all. It's just offer it and then you eat. That is all.
Okay, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, you explained so well. No more question seems to be
Oh,
there.
okay, I'm surprised. Okay, that's very nice. So do we conclude right away?
I guess one question, yeah. From Lokesh Prabhuji, is chanting Mahamantra, say like at the time of working, driving, doing day-to-day course without necessarily intending to keep count of 108 times, is it okay or not advisable?
It is okay. It is okay. See, these are, as I was saying, bhakti chants. They are not karma kanda chants. Karma kanda mantras. Karma kanda mantras have a lot of rules about them. There is a specific way that you have to pronounce. There is a specific time that you have to you have to pronounce. There are specific things that you have to do before you pronounce. So those are very strict. But then in the mode of bhakti, God only, Krishna only sees the bhakti in you, right? So these are bhakti mantras, right? So in bhakti mantras, there are absolutely no rules. You can do it as many times as you want, whenever you want, while doing whatever you want. But while driving, please be careful, focus on the road. We want you safe. Krishna will take care of it anyway, but then we should also take a little effort, isn't it? So you can do it, but then see, why is it recommended that we keep track of the times we are chanting? It's like a black account and a white account. If anybody into business, they would understand this immediately. Black account is counted, but it is not. It's not satisfactory in the sense you won't get the satisfaction of the beads. Oh, tomorrow, by the way, I'll explain how why is it important or preferable to chant on the beads. It will take about 4 or 5 minutes, just maximum 4 or 5 minutes. Please do join us for that. And the question was, yeah, is there any rules? There are no rules. You can do it at any time, but it is preferable to keep account because it instills discipline. See, when you're starting, when you're in advanced stage, things happen automatically because then you have realized the advantages and you automatically do things. But in the beginning, when you start doing things, you will find a lot of resistance. Even if you try and attempt for these 18 days, when I requested you to chant it for 1 round, you will find that there's a lot of resistance in your mind. Your mind will think of 101 things. It will take you to places that you had forgotten long back. This is the clear indication that the mantra is working. Okay, because it is like dusting. When you dust the table, the dust rises, right? So it's the mind's equivalent to that. It raises all the dust which is in your mind, and all the dust is collected and thrown out. Only then it starts sinking in. The rasa is collected only after that process is completed. Correct? So initially you will find that you will have difficulties, not difficulties in that sense. Your mind will wander, but it is all right. Even if it wanders, Srila Prabhupada says, you have 2 things to do when you are chanting. You have to chant and you have to hear what you're chanting. That is it. You don't worry about the mind when you're starting initially. The mind will follow automatically when you have reached that amount of level, that higher level of devotion. That's clear, I hope.
Yeah.
What was the question, Mataji? I'm sorry. Did I answer the question? Sometimes I go off on a tangent.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, you perfectly answered the question. It was like if we can chant doing other works.
Oh, right. Yes.
Sripad Prabhuji, you can unmute yourself. Hare Krishna, Sripad Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
What is the significance of number 108 while chanting? Why it is not a round figure of 100?
Okay. I can give you several reasons for this. And I'll give you those reasons. But it's not important. 108. Why is it 108? I'll tell you why it is 108 first, and then I'll tell you why it is not important. 108 has spiritual basis and also astronomical basis. Not astrological, astronomical basis. Spiritual basis, I'll tell you, because 108 Upanishads we have. There are 108 principal gopis for Krishna, and Krishna has 108 cows. He herds 108 sets of cows. Okay, so all these, along with the fact, and perhaps which is more relevant, is that if you take the diameter of the sun, okay, and you multiply it 108 times, you get the distance between the earth and the sun. Sorry, it's the other way around. Yeah, correct. If you take the diameter of the sun and you multiply it by 108 times, you get the distance to the earth and the sun. Similarly, for the moon, if you take the diameter of earth and you multiply it with the moon, with the distance between the earth and the moon, you get 108. But why did I say it's not relevant? See, human nature is to see patterns in everything. It's actually an evolutionary trait which has enabled us to survive for beyond all the great filters, right? So it is that we see 108 coming in so many places, so we adopt that. Now, when we adopt it, it also has this impact of aligning ourselves with the universe. Now there is this distance element. Then Krishna has things in 108. Now, when we align ourselves with the universe, things automatically fall in place. but it is not important to know it. We do it because the Shastras tell us to do it, and so it is that we are doing it. If we know it, it is good, but all right, because of course knowledge is power and all that.
No, somewhere I read that there are 54 important blood vessels in your Chandra Nadi and 54 in Surya Nadi.
Maybe
When
I
you
don't
chant
know.
108 number of times,
They are all activated.
all the vessels get
Maybe yes, maybe
intoxicated.
I don't know about that, but it may be the reason. But see, as I was saying, it's not important. You have to do it. See, you have to do it some number of times. Best is to do it as many number of times as possible.
Right.
108 is a number for us to keep count. Krishna does not see if he is doing one mala. No, he is happy that you're chanting. He is happy that you're in the devotional path. You're in the spiritual path. For him, numbers don't matter. What is important is that you are doing it. In this Kali age, as I was saying, you have to adopt that way of worship. If you adopt that, it doesn't matter how many times you are doing it. That number of times is for us to keep count. That is all. It's for that limited purpose that 108 is mentioned. We shouldn't give importance to superficial aspects, Prabhuji. That's the problem with intelligence, you see. We must give faith when we deal with the matters which are beyond intelligence, which we don't understand. Then we must approach it with faith, Shraddha, rather than intelligence. Because then if we start adopting intelligence as the way to understand, then our understanding would become very limited, isn't it?
No, my thinking is it is a age-old practice, and it is done with some purpose.
Yes.
And it is not done haphazardly. So what must be the reason? That is my curiosity.
It can be many reasons.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
you said, it can be as I said, those reasons. There can be other reasons also.
Right. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for bringing us the pearls of knowledge of bhakti, right?
Mataji is
From
always kind.
different scriptures. Like you bring it to us so effortlessly that we do not feel how much effort it takes for you to impart it to us. Like it's so
This is
transcendental.
the least
and
I can
so
do, Mataji. This is the least I can do for the amount of blessings that Krishna has bestowed on me. This is the least I can do. Spread his message.
You're so humble, Prabhuji. That's so nice, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Then
Thank
we
you
can
so
conclude
much.
if there are no further questions.
Yeah, Prabhuji.
Hare
No
Krishna.
further questions.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, devotees. You can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Nice.
Hare
Very nice.
Krishna,
Thank you. Thank you.
Message sent to you.
Please come tomorrow
Hare
also.
Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. I'll end the session. now.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for coming. Hare Krishna.